if we're going to keep recording these, yeah, there we go. If we're going to keep recording these, I'm not going to turn my camera on anymore.
Yeah, I forgot I was supposed to. Thank you for reminding me.
There we go.
Yeah. I think we're uploading to a YouTube channel.
Oh my.
So,
Okay.
hello, everyone. It's 5 minutes past. Let's give it a try. And if more people are coming in, I can admit people as they go. Again, apologize if my dog starts barking. She's not the most well-trained dog in the world. I adopted her last year, so still working on it.
It's all good.
Oh. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking your time and joining us in this Trash Talk series. Today I want to kind of go over food waste nationally. I know food waste has been a pretty big hot topic lately, but today I'll hopefully can give you guys an insight of where they're really coming from and like the magnitude of how much food waste is actually being produced every day. Our next Trash Talk series is actually going to be at 2 p.m. So hopefully no one will be traveling home from work. It'll be on the 17th, and it'll be with our other board member, Chance Thompson, and the people from the Salt Palace talking about upcycling. I think they're doing some fun art projects, and I think it's more interactive. All right. So let's dive into it. Food waste, obviously, it's from a garbage standpoint. So according to the EPA, Americans generated 292 million tons of garbage in 2018. That's roughly 4.9 pounds per person per day. That's a lot. And I didn't believe this number at first because that just seems intense and incredibly big. So one day I actually carried around a Ziploc bag and just put all my trash in there throughout the day. And that does add up quite a bit. So that is a lot of trash from 1 year. Here's just a brief breakdown of what all the garbage composition looks like. You can see a lot of these are recyclable, like paper boards, glass, metal, plastic, yard trimming. But today I want to focus on food waste, which is 21.59% of all of that 292.4 million tons of garbage. And if you see from the graph below, food waste is kind of an upward trend as of all of the waste. But if you think about that 292.4 million tons and roughly 21.6% of it was food waste, that equates to 63.16 million tons of food waste. That is so much food that's being thrown away in the landfill. So I kind of want to think about food waste in three different aspects. There's a business term called the triple bottom line, where you think about it in an environmental, economic, and social sense. So on the environmental impact of food waste is there's a lot of land that's being cleared for agriculture, and the native plant that's used to be there with deep roots that usually holds the soil together. With agricultural plants, it's new. The roots are more shallow, which will cause a lot of landslide when there's a downpour. And as you know, in agriculture, it uses a lot of water, and there's a water shortage globally. So a lot of this water is being used to grow food that we're just kind of throwing away in the garbage. So there's a lot of energy that's being wasted and like harvesting these food, processing and transporting food. And a lot of these end up in the landfill, which are making a lot of greenhouse gases when they decompose. From an economic standpoint, this is a lot of loss in raw material, and it's a very irrational economic behavior because we're putting so much energy and cost and time, and we're basically not really utilizing these products to the fullest potential. And also the social aspect of it is a lot of people are living in food insecurity. 49.1 million Americans were living in food insecurity in 2013. And these food that are all going to the landfill could be donated to the people in need. So food is basically an organic waste. And when they break down, it produces methane and carbon dioxide as a byproduct. Most people talk about carbon dioxide and climate change and the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, which methane kind of gets not being as focused as much as carbon dioxide. But even though methane breaks down within a 10 to 15 year period, it actually is more potent than carbon dioxide because it holds on to a lot more heat than carbon dioxide. So let's take a look into where all of these food waste is coming from. On the production side, you do get a lot of pest weather that's unpredictable, and the balance between supply and demand. These are hard to balance and not very predictable from year to year. So there's a tricky balance there. The other thing is when people go to harvest these produce or food, they usually have a minimum standard for coloring, size, and blemish. And a lot of times if they see something that's not very appealing to consumers, they simply will just let it sit there and rot because it's not worth their time to harvest them. After that, it goes through another inspection phase for specific weight and color and size. And again, consumers are very strict with what size, what looks okay before they actually pick it up. So going through another round of inspections, they kind of just leave food behind if they think it's not worth the labor. After it gets harvested, it goes into a packaging and processing plant. And those have their own set of standards. And if they reject them, they most likely just gets discarded. There's also a lot of food waste from like trimming or damaged products from the transportation between the processing and the packaging. That's also is just going to the landfill most of the time. So after it's been packaged, it has to be redistributed to retail stores. And during that transportation time, if there's like a vehicle breakdown or there's temperature fluctuation that causes food to go bad, once it reaches that retail store, it gets thrown away. All of these food gets their own round of acceptance standard. So for instance, if there's a bag of orange and one orange in that bag is spoiled or moldy, the entire bag gets thrown away, not just that one particular orange. So that adds up quite a bit. So that added up to roughly 30% of the grocery store's trash is just food waste. And USDA estimated that about $15 million annually is lost in retail store because appearance is so important to consumers that if they think it won't be bought, they rather have other stuff being bought. So it simply gets thrown away. Another thing is, if you notice, grocery store usually stock their produce pretty full. It's because when consumers go to buy products, they won't pick something that's just alone because it seems like all of the goods are gone. There's not a lot of options to choose from. So grocery stores tend to pack stock as much as they can, which can lead to more spoilage. The law also requires expired food to be discarded, but because the store will like to sell as many as they can, sometimes the front ones that's close to expire but not yet expire will get thrown away before it's actually due date because of the liability cost. A lot of retail store also sells food that's been prepped already, but also that's really hard to predict the demand of how much food that people are gonna buy. And then sold food are being discarded at the end of the day. For more perishable items such as rice, there's a set of time frame that they have to sell it by. If not, it gets thrown away. One of the example is kind of like Little Caesars hot and ready. People are expected to just go and get a pizza that's ready, hot and ready, and go. But it's kind of hard to predict how many people will come, and within that time frame, all of that pizza that wasn't sold during that time just has to get thrown away. And there's also a lot of food waste from the consumer side. When you go to a restaurant, when you buy food, a lot of times it's in a very large quantity, a large portion, because consumers think that if I'm paying for this food, they have a certain expectation of how much food should be on the plate, which leaves a lot of sides and plate scraps that are at the end of the day just gets thrown away. A lot of it's like salad or rice and beans, those kind of small sides that people don't really pay attention to, but it does add up at the end of the day. There's also some poor planning or over preparation at restaurants and at home. Restaurants, of course, they don't want to sell out food, so often they over prepare. And someone like me, sometimes pre-COVID, when I host a gathering, I always think people are going to eat 10 times more than me. So I always over prepare. So I think it's a very common occurrence. Also, people are deterred by these dates that's printed on all these packages. But there's a lot of differences between all these dates. For instance, like the sell-by date is kind of for grocery stores to kind of keep track when they get their product and what should be on the front of the shelf and when should be in the back. The best if used before date just indicate the peak quality of the product, not necessarily meaning it's not safe to consume if those dates are passed. Because of all of this food waste, there's the EPA came up with this food recovery system, a food recovery hierarchy, where of course we want to reduce the food waste first, then feed hungry people, then feed the animals, then for industrial uses, composting, the very, very last resort should be the landfill. And we'll just go through those as well. So we always talk about reduce, reuse, recycle. So of course, the best one is to reduce at the source, analyzing where the surplus food is coming from and purchasing only what's needed. And if you can, if you're at home, you can seek secondary use for food scraps, kind of like if you have excess vegetable scraps, you can eventually make it into vegetable stocks or you can compost it, etc. The second one is to feed hungry people, or you can donate to food bank or food pantries. There's the Good Samaritan Act, where it protects organization that donates food for being liable for the food that they donate. There's also tax break incentives for people to donate food more often. And individuals can also join their community garden, kind of like the urban farming program in Salt Lake. The next tier is to feed the food scraps to animals. When you go dump waste to the landfill, there's usually a tipping fee. Sometimes it's cheaper to sell the food scraps to farmers than to pay the tipping fee. So that would be an incentive to feed the animals. There's also the industrial uses. The oil can be utilized as the feedstock for an anaerobic digester, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that can use the biogas that's being produced from all of these food that's being broken down into renewable energy. Fat can also be used to make soap and animal food. The second to last tier is to compost. It's basically basically turning food and after it breaks down into nutrient-rich fertilizer that you can use for your garden or whatever you like. But some composting facilities will capture the heat that's being emitted during the breakdown process and utilize it to heat water or greenhouse. The last resort is, of course, the landfill. Is all of these resources being underutilized. So all of this process should be reevaluated before putting food in the landfill. Talk about a landfill a lot, and people often see it as a site of being just a site to dump your trash in. There's some more control to it, but the purpose of the landfill is basically minimizing the contact between waste and the environment. And because they have to prevent that barrier, this is kind of an overview of what a landfill usually looks like. The very bottom of it usually is a plastic liner to prevent any garbage juice to go into any of our drinking water and to prevent contamination of the environment. Also, it's compacted to all these different sections. So they usually have a daily section where they will fill it until that area is full, and then they'll seal it and cap it, and then move on to the next area. So the landfill's purpose is to manage waste, and it does its job very well, and it's very convenient and fairly cheap. But what happened a while back, a long time back, before there's more regulations around the landfill, what happens is all of these organic matter will break down, and then the landfill will be capped. But as we talked about before, there's carbon dioxide and methane that gets produced, and everyone knows that methane is a very flammable material. And what happened was a worker went to smoke and actually blew up a landfill. So now all the landfill is required to vent all of the areas that they cap, but they don't want this flammable gas to be floating around. So the EPA requires all of the landfills with these vented air to flare them. But more and more landfills are utilizing this. Instead of flaring these methane gas that's being naturally produced, they're capturing it and feeding it into a generator so they can produce some renewable energy. And the landfill is not the most sustainable long-term solution. It has to have constant monitoring to see if there's any contamination to its surrounding environment. Whereas another way that we can dispose of waste is through an anaerobic digester. Basically, it accelerates the breakdown of organic matter and captures all of the biogas that gets produced. And the feed could be any sewage, manure, municipal solid waste, food waste, green waste, anything can go in it. There's a lot of engineering that goes into it for the efficiency of it, depending on the total solid contact temperature, pH, carbon to nitrogen ratio. All of that goes into it, but usually it takes around 24 hours for a whole batch to be broken down. And at the end product of it is biogas that could be utilized to be feed into like a generator or a heater or something that could produce renewable energy, or this methane, they can purify it and make it into a pipeline grade natural gas. The leftover material, which is the post digest of the material, can be used as fertilizer or bedding. So of course, everything before it goes in is treated, and any impurity is removed. And there's a lot of engineering that goes into an anaerobic digester. And I think during the master recycling program, some of you may have been able to take a tour of the anaerobic digester down in West Valley. But here is a very basic flow chart of what happens during anaerobic digester. The organic waste goes into intake. It kind of gets broken down to smaller bits and pieces, feeds into this giant tank. And whatever is broken down, the gas is captured since it's all contained. The gas is captured to be feed into a generator or a gas molder, or they can purify it to make it into natural gas, or they can be feed into those CNG vehicles. The byproduct of it could be fertilizer or make it into compost. It's just reiterating the benefits of this anaerobic digester. Hopefully this continuing moving towards a more zero waste Salt Lake, the anaerobic digester can be used more often. So the digestate that comes out of it is rich in nutrients and can be used as fertilizer. These materials are basically composed of dead microbes, and the rest is very rich in nutrients, phosphate and potassium, which is what can be usually found in fertilizer that's commonly being used today. I did this restaurant audit about 5 years ago. Basically, I went through with consent, it was, now I'm spacing, a restaurant that was very generous to haul their Friday nights trash into an empty space. Basically, what I did was sort through all the giant dumpster trash and kind of parse out how much food waste is there and kind of get an average of, how much a Friday night's worth of trash is mostly food waste. And when I don't know if this, last time video cut out halfway, so I have a backup pulled up. But basically this is the time lapse of the whole process. Since this is 5 years ago, the text is a little bit outdated, but still very much reflect how much waste is ending up in landfill. That was something that I did for my master's program, and it was really an eye opener to see how much food waste is actually being produced. This is, I think, I total audited 3 full dumpsters of a Friday night, and this is only a clip of one of them. And a lot of it is, as I said before, a lot of sides. They've been sometimes I'll sort through it, and that would just be bags and bags of just rice and beans. There's one which is a whole bag of onion because that's during food prep. That's how much food waste that's produced. So that's just one restaurant on a Salt Lake on a Friday night. Imagine all of these different restaurants throughout the country, just restaurants alone. So yeah, there's some of the ways that we can reduce food waste is do a better job at planning. Keep a running list and only stick to the list when you go shopping, and don't go when you're hungry. I always go to the grocery store when I'm hungry. I don't know why, but it kind of screws up your list quite a bit. But include quantities on your shopping list. Sometimes I'll make my shopping list and forget the quantity and go to the store and just buy too much because I don't remember how much I needed. And buy only what you need and what you use. Sometimes it's very tempting to buy a lot of things from Costco because it's a bulk and it feels like it saves a lot of money, but you can end up spoiling a lot of the foods by not eating it in time. Here's some storage tips on how to store your vegetables and fruits longer. Fruits and vegetables sometimes will emit gases that makes it ripe faster. I know there's products that you can buy online to absorb those gas to make things last longer, but also separate like bananas, apples, and tomatoes separate from the other vegetables can also make your produce last longer. And wait to wash your berries until you want to eat them, or else they get all mushy and moldy. I like to eat my fruits and vegetables at room temp. Sorry, just fruits at room temp. So I usually keep it in the fridge and then take it out right before I'm about to eat it. Sometimes if I leave it out, it goes bad really fast. Here's just a short list of prep tips. When you get home, hurry and do all the prepping so all your food is very clear of what you have, which makes things, when you're cooking, makes things a little easier. And if you can freeze the food, go ahead and freeze them, such as, bread, fruit, or any meat that you won't be able to meet in time. But yeah. Oh, my apologies. I accidentally duplicated the screen. Let me fix that really fast. Okay. Sorry. Here's, you can be very thrifty with your stuff too. Look at your refrigerator first, see what's there. If it seems like it's past its prime, you can be creative and make it into something else, like croutons. You can make, stale bread, you can make it into croutons. Beet tops, you can saute and make it into a side dish. And there's all these dates that I mentioned before, where there's the best of use by, that just indicates the product will be best flavored, or the best quality that they think of, not necessarily pertain to the safety. Same thing with sell by date. It's for the grocery stores to kind of manage their inventory to see what came in first and what came in a little bit later, so they can kind of arrange their products by those dates. And and those don't pertain to the safety date either. And there's the use by date, which is the last date that we recommend that use for the product for the best quality, also not by any safety measure. And same thing with the freeze by date. Also just is an indication of when the product should be frozen to maintain peak quality. I listened to a podcast a few years ago about all of these dates and how it started. I think it started with Pepsi was competing with Coke, and I think one of the campaigns that they started was trying to compete with Coke, is saying like our sugar is fresher than yours. So they started printing these dates on, and that kind of got adopted by other food products. Some of these dates are more arbitrary than other, especially with dairy. When, like, for instance, if you buy a jug of milk in the hot summer day and drive it home, like that 10-15 minutes can make your milk spoil faster versus if you buy a jug of milk in the middle of winter and driving it home, that dairy product isn't exposed to this high temperature. So use your judgment by, smell usually is a really, really good indicator to see if your food has passed its prime. So try not to go by these dates. All of this sound very depressing on all this food waste is being thrown away. So I would just like to mention what other cities are doing to eliminate food waste. So like in 2011, Connecticut became the first state to ban food waste. So they have kind of like Seattle where it have the compost bin, another separate bin for all your food waste. So, but for Connecticut, it banned any organization that produced more than 2 tons a week of food waste. They're required to donate or recycle food. The following year, 2012, Vermont passed a very similar law where organization located within 20 miles of a recycling plant that produces more than 2 tons per week will have to do the same thing as to donate or recycle the food waste. Since in 2013, Connecticut was very successful with the organization level. They expanded the food waste ban to residents. In 2014, Massachusetts joined the other states, and organization that generated more than 1 ton of food per week will have to donate or recycle the food waste. Cities such as Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco also ban any organic waste disposal in the landfill. I know those cities often do audits of residents' bin and try to educate residents of what goes and where. Sometimes that could be very, very confusing. Here's some numbers. Napa City, California got a $3 million grant to build an anaerobic digester. All that biogas that was captured from the digester powered their 35 garbage trucks that went around the city and collected waste. And the city piloted the programs to the resident to recycle their organic waste as well. And because of that kind of rollout, they can expand their program to the entire city. Unfortunately, sometimes it does come to money and didn't cover all the capital costs, but there was a long-term return of $1 million for 35 trucks that was justified. In 2012, the Durst organization in New York City started doing their own compost program to produce fertilizer for their rooftop green space. So there's not a lot in Salt Lake, but some cities will build, especially in Seattle, where people are the city's more investing a little bit more in these greener initiatives. They have a lot of rooftop green space. So basically, the flat building's rooftop is covered with greenery that also reduces heat that's required because it cools the building. But but the food waste, the compost that's being produced, the fertilizers being produced from the compost is being fertilizing these rooftop green space. And there's been studies to show that people who are surrounded by greenery do increase productivity. So New York City wished to divert 75% of their waste by the end of 2016. They gradually started in 2013, started at household. 2014, they expanded to close to 250,000 households and 400 schools. So it's projected to process about 250 tons of food waste by the end of 2015. Some restaurants also joined the food waste challenge and diverted more than 2,500 tons of food waste over a 6-month period. Garbage is very expensive to haul around. So if New York's that spends $350 million hauling garbage around, if they can divert some of these waste, that will save the city a lot of money as well. Kind of circling back to all these nifty tips that people can have. The URA is doing this crowdsourced documentary where there's on the URA website, you can submit a Google form with a short video of what you're doing to be more zero waste, not just pertaining to food waste, but if you have any nifty tips or anything like that you'd like to share with the world, this will be a great place to submit your video, and we'll compile it into a documentary and premiere it at some point of fall of 2021. I was a little nervous, so I talked a little bit faster than I anticipated, but thank you so much for joining. If you guys have any questions, please speak up. I've used this meme a lot at work, and I was a little bummed to find out that the success baby is no longer a baby. It's a grown-up kid that I am just very old now. So, yeah, if you guys have any questions, we have about 15 minutes left. Feel free to share your nifty tricks of how you're reducing food waste at home.
Hey, Evelyn, great presentation. I was wondering if you knew anything about these shops. Like, have you ever been to NPS Grocery?
No.
So there's a shop in Salt Lake. Well, I don't know. It's off of California, so I don't know what that's considered. Off Redwood, California, that area. And they sell a lot of stuff. There's a groceries part, and then there's an everything else part. And it's kind of, I joke around and say it's the stuff that fell off the back of a truck.
Oh, yeah. I actually been there once.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they sell a lot of expired food.
Yeah.
And I'm fine buying it because it's significantly discounted.
Uh-huh.
And yogurt, for example, yogurt really goes way beyond what the best buy dates are.
Yeah.
And you can buy it way cheaper. But if there are actually laws, you had said that some grocery stores will throw food away before the time because they don't want to be held liable.
Mm-hmm.
And then you showed a number of those different sell-by dates or best by dates and so forth, and said that wasn't a safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
Then what is the legal justification? I mean, what are they trying to avoid by not selling it? And then how can NPS sell it?
I think it comes down to, unfortunately, it may come down to convenience and transportation of these food. And like, I know some grocery stores, some restaurants have been sued. And, there's this whole legal thing with liability because someone got sick. So I think places are just more hesitant to do so, even though the Good Samaritan Act does protect them from it. And it's
so it's not a legal issue of it has to be sold by this, but more the fear of being sued.
Yeah.
I see.
It's funny that you mentioned yogurt because during that podcast I listened to, and I think it was 99% Invisible, and this is like 3 or 4 years back, they actually used yogurt as an example. They had blind testers that came in and basically just spaced each yogurt out by a day.
Yeah.
And then they just rate it. And if the rating kind of dropped, they're like, oh, 7 days from this production time, let's call this the best by date. So it's very arbitrary.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's sometimes thicker and creamier when it's later than the date.
Yeah.
That's just me.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting. It started as a commercial campaign, and then it all of a sudden became the standard of how these foods are rated.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yeah. Anyone like to share their nifty trip tips and tricks? I also like to, last time we did a trash talk, I was surprised to find people from so far away. If you guys don't mind kind of introducing yourself with, or like where you're from, how'd you hear about us? I know you, Janiki, but thank you.
I'm Janiki. I'm in Salt Lake, and I'm also a URA board member.
I'm Sylvie. I'm in Salt Lake as well, and I am just on some different environmental activity mailing lists.
I'm Tina. I'm in Park City, and I was just interested in learning more about what I can do to reduce waste.
I'm Melinda. I'm from Lehigh, and I actually serve on the sustainability committee here in town. So I'm trying to get my hands on all the good stuff and what I can take back to our committee for consideration for what the city can do.
And I think I didn't go into as much as utilizing food waste because I think previous Trash Talk series did cover that. I think we're trying to upload everything to YouTube so people can go back and kind of have that as a resource.
A question I have, I know a lot of your stuff is based in Salt Lake County, but I'm wondering if anyone knows of a place in Utah County that accepts food waste. I really want to be a composter, but I'm not sure about it yet. We're just a household of 2, so I'm like trying to weigh the pros and cons of that, but I really would love to find a place that would take my food scraps. I think, is it Animalia in Salt Lake County that takes it? So, I mean, I wouldn't mind driving up there, but that kind of defeats the purpose if there's a place closer to home. So just wondering if anybody had any resources that way for Utah County or closer to Utah County than Animalia.
Sure. I can ask fellow board members and get back to you. That's a really good question. I think we're too focused on Salt Lake, and Salt Lake, Utah County kind of gets,
It is a harder sell down here, I'm not going to lie, which is kind of frustrating, but I'm starting to find there's more people that are interested. So hopefully, more people, or there'll be more opportunities down here eventually, but just in the meantime, wondering.
Yeah.
And Melinda, in the municipalities, do they collect Christmas trees at all? Are there any kind of compost collections?
Down here, they did have green waste through, I can't remember which district it was, and it was in American Fork, and I guess there was a strange scent in American Fork for a while, and I remember that. And they attributed it to this green waste composting, so they shut it all down. But if I'm remembering my facts right, they found out that there was someone that was not like contracted, who did not have a permit to do composting at a large scale, and that's actually where the odor was coming from. It wasn't from the legit composting. So we don't have green waste composting anymore. I know they do, like they did collect Christmas trees. They had us take them to the rodeo grounds here in Lehigh. But the green waste is unfortunately gone, and that great composting soil that we could get our hands on, we can't get that anymore. So it's really unfortunate. Yeah.
It's too bad.
Yeah, I'm in the county, and luckily the city does make it available to us. We have to pay for it, but they will take our compost something like 8 or 9 months of the year. And then we do have a home compost, and there's just 2 of us. We ended up buying this one that was out of Sweden because it's completely tight. My husband was very worried about rats. And that has worked, but there is a learning curve to it. So we do split stuff up. Some stuff goes to the county, and some stuff we keep for our garden.
Yeah, I know there's like a delicate balance of like nitrogen and phosphate before it can, for like maximum composting rate. So it does get a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've researched it and become easily overwhelmed. So, because I am not a scientist, nor would I trust myself to not start my backyard on fire by mixing in the wrong things. So
Yeah.
And it is hard without the right yard scraps, enough green and browns and the right stuff.
right.
For years, I used to do vermicomposting indoors, and that worked really great for me as long as I was eating healthily enough that I had plenty of produce scraps, because then I would sort of phase out of that and go into a, nothing but pizza mode, and the worms suffered greatly. I was not a good steward of my worms.
How long were you able to sustain them?
I did it for probably 4 years solid.
Wow.
Wow.
And I just had a nice worm factory bin in my kitchen, and it had built in different tray layers so that the system just kind of worked itself up through you'd start putting the composting stuff in a higher level tray, and the worms would migrate on up to that when they were ready for it. And by the time you got the worms into the top, the bottom was gorgeous compost.
Wow.
Wow.
So it was pretty nice. And
And
I
what
had it, like
about
I said,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I had it indoors in my kitchen, and this was a non-air conditioned apartment in Los Angeles. So it was good and warm a lot of the time.
And
And
smell?
nope, I mean, if you lifted the lid, it smelled like rich Mother Earth.
Huh.
So it was pretty nice, but it's a thought.
Yeah, make me eat healthier too.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping for me too. But
You put anything in there like banana peels and avocado rinds and
banana peels, if you're not eating a ton of them, and or if you cut them up a little bit, like instead of throwing in a whole peel, chop it into smaller bits for them. No animal products.
Yeah.
And no like grease, like no coconut oil or things like that. But yeah, pretty much everything else.
and citrus, no problem?
If you don't overload it, yep.
Okay.
Again, if you're somebody who juices, 6 oranges a day, that's going to probably be too much. But
Wow.
I'm wondering if there's ever like farmers or ranchers that would want food scraps. Like that might be something to look into down here. I don't know, maybe that's not a thing because I've never been a farmer or a rancher, but I don't know. I know we have some mink farms around. I don't know if I don't know. Something to look into, I guess.
Yeah. My parents are from Taiwan, and like their waste solution is pretty efficient. I don't know if you guys are interested in, since we have 3 minutes left. And so in Taipei, since it's so dense that they don't have space for garbage trucks to come pick up your trash. So what happens is they have a garbage truck with a song singing and like these kind of like an ice cream truck that will come by and everyone will gather and take their trash out. But all of your trash bags have to be from government issue bags. And those are all your trash. But so if you have to buy the bags through like a convenience store and it's marked up because it's a government issue. So, but if you recycle or sort your food waste out, those are collected for free. So that's like kind of a way, like a financial incentive that they did to reduce the stuff that's going to the landfill because they were running out of space.
Nice.
That'd be cool if Americans would buy off on that.
Yeah, I think that will turn into protests, but
yeah.
I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, and we always had to sort ours. We called it rubbish was the trash, and garbage was any food waste. And they went into separate containers because our little town had a contract with a local pig farmer, and he got all of the food waste garbage for the pigs. Has its own issues, but
a great solution.
From what I'd read in California, because of all the wine growers and so forth, that there was an easy way to use food waste, and that's why they were able to create these systems in these other regions, where San Francisco and so forth, that they didn't have to cart it so far to a place that could use it. And that's what made me think about, Utah County. It seems that it's still, there's elements of agriculture that is still there, is that there should be a symbiotic relationship between somebody could use this stuff. Otherwise it's just going to, I would assume, the same landfill.
Right. Yeah. I'll have to look into that.
interesting stuff.
But from your presentation, Evelyn, I mean, it's one thing for the households, but the restaurants, that's just crazy.
Yeah. I was pretty surprised when I did that whole video, because that was just, a Friday night. I thought it was like 2 days worth. That was just like Friday night's trash, and it was like that 6 cubic feet. That container was pretty much full every single Friday night.
Wow.
And that's a lot of sides.
And with the Salt Lake digester now in action, do you know, do you have any figures for, is it being used by restaurants or anything?
I know a few years ago, there was I think when Morgan was still in Momentum, there was a big push of restaurants coming together and diverting their food waste. I'm not sure where that went. But I know there's a lot of talk, especially when that digester was done being built.
Yeah. We can hope.
Yeah. There's a lot of potential. And I think a lot of this is, through education, because no one would have, I wouldn't have believed there was that much waste until I did that audit. So I think as more people get educated, I think there's more push for these kind of diversion and recycling and such. So, well, it's past 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining and making this easy. I do tend to get a little bit anxious and nervous, so thank you for bearing with me.
Thanks, Evelyn.
It was great. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you.
Thank you. You did a great job.
Thanks. Well, you all have a good night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.